أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Taha. So this surah begins with the letters Ta and Ha. And as you probably know, there are times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Alif Lam Mim for example, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses these letters in the Quran, and the commentators basically, we don't know exactly what's the meaning of these letters. People have, given different reflections about it, but ultimately, Allah Ta'ala alam, what the meaning of these letters are. We do know that the Prophet ﷺ tells us that every single letter that you read in the Quran, you have a reward for it. And so when you read Alif Lam Mim, it's a reward for each letter, Alif, Lam, and Mim. It really shows and emphasizes the importance and significance of the Quran, that it's not even like each word that has the weight and the power, but each letter has a power to it. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just uses letters, and Allah ta'ala alam, He knows the meaning. ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى. The meaning of this ayah is that we have not sent down to you the Quran that you be distressed. And the sometimes people, when they're trying to seek the path to God or to spiritual enlightenment, they think that that path is it has to be a path of self-inflicted pain. Okay, we don't say that. Sometimes definitely we know that we face struggles, but it's not self-inflicted. We never ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tests. In fact, we're never supposed to ask Allah for hardship or a test. One of the most foolish things that one could do is to think, I'm so strong, I can do this, my iman is so strong, Allah, test me, like I'll show you, I'm gonna, I'm so strong. This is as if you're challenging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's something that you should never do. You should never ask for a test or challenge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and want hardship. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us strength in hardship when it's, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends that, but we never ask for it. And sometimes, even in other faiths, or maybe some people have this understanding of like actually inflicting pain on the physical body and thinking that elevates the soul, and it's self-inflicted. What I mean, people will inflict physical pain thinking that will elevate them, elevate the soul itself. And this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that's not the case. It's not the goal of this. That's not the goal. The goal of this message, the goal of this Quran, is not so that you will be in pain. It's not so you will be distressed. It's not intended for hardship. But the goal of it is something else. And so, we don't have to feel that, and also sometimes people think that Islam is supposed to be something rigid and difficult and painful. Sometimes people think that being religious means being really narrow and really strict, and that means you're more religious. And the more difficult something is, it must be better. And this is not the case. It's not the more difficult something is, the better it is. Yeah, and that's sometimes how people define, if you have two options, right? If you have the one option that's more difficult and one option that's easier, sometimes people have of this type might think that it's more religious, it's better to always choose the harder option. And this is not even the case of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, when he would have two options, if they were both acceptable, he would choose the easier one. And that we're told that this is supposed to be ease, not supposed to be hardship on us. That Islam is something that goes with human nature, not against human nature. So it isn't supposed to be something painful. That doesn't mean we don't face struggle, But that's different than thinking that it's the intent is for struggle. The intent is not struggle. The intent is not pain. But actually the other way around. It's to elevate you and to actually facilitate you through struggle. The difference? It's not to bring struggle, it's to help you through struggle. So it's not the cause, but actually the facilitator. إِلَّا تَذْكِرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى. So the ayah before says that we have not sent this Quran down that you be distressed, but only as a reminder for those who have khashya, those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This Quran is revealed as a reminder, but for who? This Quran is revealed as a reminder for those who have khashya, who have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's interesting that, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the Quran and describes this type of message, a lot of times it's referred, there's the reference to a reminder, a dhikr. And this is important because why is it important for us to be reminded? Because by our very nature, we tend to forget. We can know something and then we forget it. And this is human nature. And even when you look at the word for in Arabic, the word for human is insan. And insan comes from the same root, shares the same root as nisyan, which means to forget, forgetting. Human beings by nature are forgetful. We forget. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends us al-dhikr, which is this. And even if you look at the whole span of existence, what has happened to mankind? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent his message to Adam alayhi salam from the beginning. What happened after him? Well, his kids already, and then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent another messenger. And then what happened? They forgot, right? They moved away. They left the path. And then Allah sent another messenger and another messenger. This is like what we do as humans, is we forget. And even if you look at the span of our own life, of one human life, you can look at all of mankind and you can look at one human life. We can know something one moment, and then what happens, later? What happens the next day? What happens a week later? We forget. We forget what we knew. And even and there's different types of knowing. There's different types of knowledge too. We know that there is there's a knowledge that you can have here. The knowledge that you can have in your mind, that you can have information in your mind here. And there's a completely different knowledge which you have in the heart. And so something doesn't become actually, true knowledge until it's in the heart, until it's, in a sense, until it's experiential. It's something that you actually experience and you really know. Whereas anybody can have the knowledge that's in the mind, even a non-believer. I mean, some of the, John Esposito, he is a scholar, right, in quotation marks, of Islam, but he's not a Muslim. So he can teach, he has the knowledge up here in his brain. He can teach more beautifully this information than a Muslim could, maybe, some. But he doesn't have it here because he's not a believer. So the idea that it's just about having knowledge here is wrong, because this isn't the knowledge that's going to benefit, and it isn't the knowledge that's going to be acted upon. Because what drives us, it's not our mind, it's our heart. It is not our mind, it's our heart. The heart actually drives the mind. And this is something that a lot of people want to claim is not the case. A lot of people think that, no, I'm a rational person. I follow my mind, I follow my brain. But the truth is, the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith told us, for example, that in the body is a mudgha, is a piece of flesh. And if that piece of flesh is set right, the entire body is set right. And if that piece of flesh is corrupted, the entire body is corrupted. And verily it is, it's not the mind, verily it is the heart. So it's the heart that's actually in charge. Whatever condition you have that heart in, that's what's going to determine how the rest of your body acts, how you act. And it's, one other thing that you can see. Sometimes you don't, you can't look into a person's heart and see the condition of a person's heart, right? You can't look even into your own heart and see the condition. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only knows, right? He can see. So then what are some ways to know the condition of a heart? Right? This is a natural question. How do we know what is the condition of my heart? What is the condition of a heart? What are some of the ways to know? What are the indicators? And here is where you see that the indicators, one of the indicators of the condition of a heart is how the person acts. So that's why we talk about akhlaq and we talk about khalq. So khalq is the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the body, the external creation, externally. The akhlaq is the internal creation, is what's the condition inside. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a hadith that he says that I have come, he said that that he has been sent. So his mission, one of the things that he has been sent to do, I have sent لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ إِنِّي بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. So I have been sent to rectify, beautify, to set right, أُتَمِّمَ, make them, the مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ, to beautify and to set the akhlaq. And akhlaq is sometimes referred to or translated as manners, but in general, like, it is the internal image. It's what you are inside that gets reflected. One of the definitions, so the definition that Ibn al-Qayyim gives, rahimahullah, in Madarij al-Salikin, talks about, for example, this is when he defines one of the akhlaq, one of the manners of chivalry, for example, futuwa. He says that it's something that it's like a trait that you have that will be reflected in your actions akhlaq is a trait that you have that will be reflected in your actions without like a struggle. It's kind of just like, it's just the way you are naturally without putting in effort. And that's a khulq. When it becomes something that's so ingrained in you that you don't have to struggle to do it. So for example, generosity. You don't have to push yourself to be generous. It has become a manner. It has become a set part of your internal state. So one of the ways to see the condition of the heart, to see the condition of that inner part, is by seeing the way that somebody acts. If somebody's put in a situation where they need now to be generous, but they act in a way that's not generous, that's a reflection of what it looks like inside. So my heart is reflected in the way that I act. Now I have a question. Sometimes people, they make the argument that sometimes people, for example, you hear this a lot with hijab, is that the justification for not wearing hijab is that person X, Y, and Z wears hijab but doesn't act, or they're not doing these other good things, or they're not acting. Or people will say, that my heart, it's in my heart, right? So that the hijab maybe is in my heart, or my iman is, and this is very true, that the iman is in the heart, but the heart, whatever condition the heart is in, needs to be reflected in the actions, because that's actually, it shows, it's a direct reflection of the condition of the heart. You can be doing external actions that are so-called good, but the heart is not good. Now stay with me. But if the heart is good, it necessarily will be shown in external actions. Does that make sense? So external actions doesn't necessitate that the heart is good, because some people do external actions and the heart is dirty. It hasn't actually affected the heart. But if the heart is clean, it will come out in the muamalat, in the way that the person acts, in the way the person reacts, in the way the person treat people, in the way that the person behaves. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the next ayah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى. A revelation from He who created the earth and the highest heaven. Now, one of the reflections that Sheikh Mukhtar had given about this ayah is, you notice that in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins, usually when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the heavens and the earth, He usually says as-samawati wal-ard, in that order. The heavens and the earth, in that order. Heavens comes first. But in this ayah, earth comes first. Yeah? So it's a revelation from He who created the earth and the highest heaven. And the reflection he gave is it's earth that we're concerned with. You know, that this revelation is coming down to a people who are so caught up in earth, who are so concerned with earth. So it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that He begins with what we are so caught up in and so concerned with, and the heavens, and we need to elevate ourselves from just being concerned with earth, right? And the next ayah says, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arshi istawa. The next ayah, the meaning of the most merciful who is above the throne established. Ala al-arshi istawa. Now, a couple reflections about this ayah. One is that the way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala istawa, the way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishes Himself, is not something that we can comprehend or imagine in any way, shape, or form. If there's anything that one does imagine, we know for sure that it's not that. And we know that because laysa kamithlihi shay. There is nothing like Him or like unto Him. So anything we might imagine isn't Him, because He's not like anything. So how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishes Himself, or what the throne is, or all of these things we can't think about, we can't imagine, but we know that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. We take it as it is. We don't try to put it in something we can think about or imagine or put a thought to. The other reflection here is that Allah is talking about something really mighty, which is that He is established on a throne. It's like if you think of like a king wants to exert power and tell you, to exert might and power and show might by saying that, I am, I have this throne and I'm establishing myself. The characteristic that this king would probably use would probably not be the merciful. It would be something else. It would be the mighty or the powerful. Look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The way in which His might and His power is with mercy. He says Ar-Rahman. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses this attribute to use in talking about His power. I mean, He's establishing Himself on the throne. But He says Ar-Rahman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't like, A'udhu Billah, human being who has power is like a tyrant. A human being who has might is, he establishes his might and his power with force, yeah, with in like a as a with with tyranny basically. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does it with mercy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this attribute in talking about his power over us and over the universe. له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما بينهما وما تحت الثرى. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about what He owns. Allah says that to Him belongs what is in the heavens and what is in the earth, what is on the earth, and what is between them, and what is under the soil. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving, if you imagine what is in the heavens, okay, what's in the heavens, what's in the earth, what's in between, what's left? What's even under? He even says what is under the earth, to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, the vastness of His dominion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns everything. The what? It's referring to the whole universe. I mean, it's referring to everything basically up. I mean, it includes when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says samawati wal ard, it includes everything. It includes everything. I mean, it's in his power and in his dominion, and what he owns is everything. So this is referring to everything. But in this ayah, it's specific. It says that it's heavens, earth, between and under the soil. وَإِن تَجْهَرُوا بِالْقَوْلِ فَإِنَّهُ يَعْلَمُ السِّرَّ وَأَخْفَى. So look at this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if you speak loud, if you're talking loud, then indeed he knows. What would he Okay, if you're talking really loud and he's telling you that he knows, you might think that he will say he knows what you're saying. What you're saying when you talk loud. Well, he doesn't say that. He says if you speak loud, then indeed he knows the secret and what is even more hidden. So what's being said here? So he's saying that if you speak really loud, he knows when you're speaking, what is secret, what you're even not, saying, and what is even below that. What's below a secret? What's below a secret? Even the things which haven't even been aware, you are not even aware of. Maybe the subconscious, maybe the things which have not even come to you yet, is not even secret yet. So you think look at how Allah is saying that if you speak loudly, he doesn't even address that. He addresses what's even more hidden. He can even hear that. He can even hear what is hidden and what is under hidden, what is under this, what's secret, even what I am not aware of. Almost, whatever is hidden from me, even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can hear. So imagine what we're saying out loud, if you're talking. So you see the comparison. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa lahul asma'ul husna. Allah, there is nothing worthy of worship except for Him. To Him belongs the best names. Now, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives this introduction to Allah's power, Allah's might, Allah's rahmah, right? Ar-Rahman, He describes Himself in talking about His throne and establishing Himself on the throne. Then He moves to the story of Musa alayhi salam. وَهَلْ أَتَاكَ حَدِيثُ مُوسَى. Has the story of Musa reached you? إِذْ رَأَى نَارًا فَقَالَ لِأَهْلِهِ أَمْكِثُوا. So Musa alayhi salam says, he sees, this is when he's going with his family, and he sees a fire. And he says, and the commentators say that he's the only one who sees it. His family doesn't see it. So he says to his family, "Stay here. Indeed, I have perceived a fire. Perhaps I can bring you a torch or find at the fire some guidance." So what he's doing right now is he's going off. He's leaving his family to go see what this fire is, and maybe he can bring some back, or he can find guidance there. One of the reflections for this ayah that was given was that sometimes you have to go away. Sometimes you have to go away for a bit, right? And you have to leave things behind, and sometimes people might not understand that. People might not so he's explaining to his family, I have to go. I have to I have to go away for a while. And that sometimes this is something that people have to do in their their path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It isn't to say that he didn't abandon his family completely, but he had to go away, and in that we'll see what what ends up happening in that separate where he had to leave. فَلَمَّا آتَاهَا نُودِيَ يَا مُوسَى. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses him by name. We know that Musa alayhi salam is the one who spoke with Allah. So when he came to it, he was called Ya Musa. Can you guys just imagine that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling you by name? This is what happened to Musa alayhi salam. Allah is calling him and calling him Ya Musa. I mean, just try to imagine. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إني أنا ربكم فاخلعن عليك. So he tells him, indeed I am your Lord. So the first thing he tells him He calls it by his name, then he tells him I am your Lord, and then the first order he gives him is to take off his shoes. So, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّكَ بِالْوَادِ الْمُقَدَّسِ طُوًى. So this means that indeed you are in the sacred valley of Taha. So the first thing he tells him, he commands him to take off his shoes because he's in the sacred valley. And there have, commentators have talked about this in different explanations of why it could be that Musa alayhi salam is told to take off his shoes. And one of the explanations is that one of the reflections is, if you think about what is the purpose of a shoe. The purpose of a shoe is to do what? Exactly, to protect your feet. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him to take off that protection. That was a means. The shoe, and this is subhanAllah, in every order right now that he gives to Musa alayhi salam, all of it is for him to throw the means. What I mean by the means is the things which Musa alayhi salam might have been dependent upon other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your shoes represent something which you consider that they're protecting you. And this is really this is symbolic. Okay, this is he's told to remove that which something which he thinks is protecting him other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remove it. Take it off. Then what's the next thing? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to him, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وأنا أخترتك فاستمع لما يوحى. And I have chosen you, اخترتك. So listen to what is revealed to you. إنني أنا الله لا إله إلا أنا فاعبدني وأقم الصلاة لذكري. Now he's telling him that I have chosen you, so listen to what I've revealed to you. Indeed, I am Allah. There is nothing worthy of worship but me. So worship me and establish prayer for my remembrance. So the first thing he's telling him, after first telling him to remove his shoes, is he's saying, I am your Lord, and there is nothing else worthy of worship but me. It's Tawheed, from the beginning, Tawheed. And then he tells him, because I am your Lord, and there's nothing else worthy of worship but me, so establish salah for my remembrance. So the first commandment, once you establish that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah's tawheed, Allah's oneness, there's nothing else worthy of worship, is dhikr, is to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the importance of dhikr is remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is establishing salah. He's not just telling him to pray. Establishing salah is something different. Aqim as-salah is not to, you just pray a couple times, or it is establishment of something is different than doing something. That it's something that it's consistent, it's established in the society, it's established in you, in your routine, in your families. It's something that's very solid, and it is for what? For dhikr, for my remembrance. Now the topic of dhikr is something it's its own topic, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I just want to give just a couple reflections about it. Again, back to the fact that we are forgetful. Human beings are forgetful. The heart also is something that it gets off course. And if you think about the heart in terms of, or the way that we're supposed to be going in this path, is if you think of a traveler who has, if you want to get to where you're going and you're in the middle of wilderness, what do you need to show you your way? Say you know that you need to be going north. You know you're supposed to go north. But how are you going to know where north is? You need a compass, right? So what? But if you had no other way of knowing the direction, you need a compass. So you can know that the way to success is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know you want to end up at Allah, but how do you get there? You have to have a compass, and you have to orient yourself in the direction of that success towards Allah. Moral compass, true. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be what you're facing. But what happens is you might direct yourself towards Allah and face Allah and start walking. Alhamdulillah, you faced Allah, and that is, where you're going. But what happens if you don't check the compass? Yeah, you start going off. You start going, maybe you're not going a little bit, a few degrees, even a few degrees, and you keep going that way. Where do you end up? Completely off. So reorientation, this is the concept, is when you are constantly checking and constantly pushing the heart back to Allah, pushing the heart back to facing Allah. Because what happens is through our life, we face Allah once and then we face something else. We face this way, we face that way, we face this problem or this person or this thing in our life, we face our own desires, whatever it is that we start to put our focus in other things, bringing it back. This is something in when he talks about the cycle, he calls it cycle of 𝐁𝐿𝐒𝐒, the cycle of purification. One of the cornerstones of that cycle, of that process, is tawbah. And tawbah literally means to return, to turn back. This is that process of reorientation, where you're stopping yourself and saying, no, I have to go back. I have to go back. And this is a reorientation of what? Is it a physical reorientation? It's a reorientation of the heart. Putting the heart back at Allah, facing Allah. No, I'm facing Allah. You guys understand what I'm saying? And so that is the only way that you're going to, and this has to happen as a regular process, this regular tawbah, going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, refocus. You guys understand what I mean? We get distracted. Who doesn't get distracted? You get distracted. So part of that reorientation has to do with dhikr. So the three parts of the cycle that he described, just like quickly, of tazkiyah. Because it's a cycle, he said it can start at any of the 3 points. But one of the one point is ilm. Ilm is knowledge, is having a healthy, what he describes as a healthy diet of ilm, where you're regularly learning, and it's the it's the healthy ilm. If you think of ilm as food, and you just like you need a regular diet of food, right? You can't just say I eat once and I don't need to eat for another week, but you have it regularly. Similarly, you don't just eat junk food and expect to be healthy. You have to have healthy food. So good, solid knowledge regularly. Regular diet of ilm. The second, or the next step, tawbah. Tawbah is this constant process, and this has to be regular, where you reorient the heart towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not, you get distracted by things, you bring it back, you bring it back, you bring it back. I'm facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The heart is facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And repentance is part of this. And then the third one is mujahada. And mujahada is just an umbrella term for the struggle, struggling to stay on this path. And within mujahada are different, like what he would say, these are like helpers, or these are the things that support mujahada, and that has to do with less eating, less talking, less sleeping, and dhikr, remembrance. Constantly, something I found really, really interesting, and this is something to keep in mind. Whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about dhikr in the Quran, it is always coupled with kathir, kathiran. Kathiran means a lot. Dhikr needs to be a lot. Remembrance, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about remembrance, and this is something I personally, it's like a sort of a light bulb moment for me personally, because sometimes we think that we're just, as long as we're praying 5 times a day, even if we do that, but I'm gonna say best case scenario, we're like, okay, we're praying 5 times a day, God, we're okay, it's enough. It's like what I personally have learned for me, that was really like an aha moment, is that and we'll get to this actually in one of the advice that Allah tells Musa alayhi salam. We'll talk about this. It needs to be a lot. It needs to be a lot. It needs to basically be all the time for you to be okay. For you just to be okay. It really is air. you just you just don't realize it. Like sometimes you feel like I'm suffocating. I don't have like I'm not okay, but you don't know why. Because I'm praying, but it's just not enough. It's just not enough. You're not realizing. And what I realized is that it actually it's like air. It's like, oh, but I already breathed. I mean, I took a couple breaths today. I took like 5. I'm okay. Why am I having so much all these problems from like, lack of oxygen? You don't get it. But it's because it's not enough. It really is air, and it needs to be so much. Like that's really, I think that's probably one of the main lessons that I learned is this how much it needs to be. And I think that's just, it seems like such a simple concept, but just like you didn't realize, like you're sitting here looking for all these theories as to what's wrong. And it's just such a simple answer. It just isn't enough. Yeah, you're remembering it, but it's just not enough. SubhanAllah, like for me, I mean, that was like big, big epiphany, just realizing that. And the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always says kathiran when talking about dhikr. It has to be a lot. It's not enough just to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has to be a lot. And this is comes later too in this section when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala advises Musa alayhi salam. This is like so powerful, this section, I mean these ayat. So then the next ayah 15. Indeed, the translation, indeed the hour is coming, I almost conceal it, so that every soul may be recompensed according to that for which it strives. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the hour is so hidden, He almost concealed it, so that everybody will be given, payback, recompense for what they strove for. So we have to be careful what we strive for, because we're going to be repaid for whatever we strive for. You will have what you strive for, what you really work for. Okay. So the next ayah 16, do not let one avert you from it who does not believe in it and follows his desire, for you then would perish. Okay, this ayah is talking about not letting a person who doesn't believe in it, in what? The Day of Judgment. And what's the second characteristic of this person? اتبع هواه, that this person follows his hawa. The one who doesn't believe in the Day of Judgment follows his hawa by definition. If you don't believe in a hereafter, if you don't believe and you don't have the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then by definition you're following your hawa. Because either Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance or it's hawa. Everything else is hawa. So the question is, what's hawa? Hawa is the thing that drives a person internally. Whether it's an emotional drive or whatever kind of drive, intellectual drive, any drive internally that is not from the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us, or is from Allah. If it's not from Allah, any other drive, intellectual, emotional, whatever, is hawa. It's from me. It's my lower drives. And so a person who follows that and makes that their Lord, that's the one who's going to lead you astray. He's telling you not to let that person lead him astray, the one who follows his hawa. Now, Musa alayhi salam is asked, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما تلك بيمينك يا موسى. Now he's asked about something else. So he took off his shoes, right? Now he's asked, what's in your right hand, O Musa? So what does Musa alayhi salam say? It's interesting because I've heard a tafsir of this section by two different people. Yeah, you've heard Nouman Ali Khan's? Yeah, his is really interesting too. And it's so interesting to have heard it then by Sheikh Mukhtar. Very different, but very interesting. They're just both, have you guys heard of Nouman Ali? Pardon? I think so, yeah. So Nouman Ali Khan talks about this section. It's like one of his favorite sections. I've heard him talk about it like more than once. And he talks about it in a way where Musa alayhi salam is like trying to extend the conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's like talking about all these different things he does with his stick. But subhanAllah, you know, he has his thing, and then Sheikh Mukhtar, when he talks about it from like another angle. SubhanAllah, both really beautiful. This ayah, when he describes it, he says, "Ma tilka bi yaminaka ya Musa," and he says, it's أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قال هي عصاي أتوكأ عليها. So first he says, it's my staff, أتوكأ عليها, which means I lean on it. He leans on it. You guys get where we're going? What did we say about the shoes? He's leaning on it, just like the shoes, right? And then he says, I lean on it and I bring down leaves for my sheep, and I have therein other uses. That's where he's trying to, where Nu'man Ali Khan says he's extending the conversation, and other things too. But look at what Musa alayhi salam is saying he does with his staff. He leans on it. His staff is something he's depending on. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell him to do with his staff? Throw it. Oh, I love it. He tells him to throw it. قال ألقها يا موسى. Throw it. Throw your staff. This thing you're depending on, throw it. So what's left? What is left for Musa alayhi salam to depend on? What's left for Musa alayhi salam to depend on is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the idea here is what is happening with Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam is being trained. Musa alayhi salam is being trained and is being prepared for something. What's he being trained and prepared for? Being prepared for. He's being trained and prepared to go to Fir'aun. So he's part of his training and his preparation is throw the means, throw those things other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which you are depending on. Your shoes, your staff, throw it. And then when he throws it, what happens to it? Allah said, throw it, O Musa. So he threw it down, and thereupon it was a snake moving swiftly. Now the staff becomes a snake. So that thing which you thought was a certain way, you thought it was just this, innocent thing that's made of wood, and it's helping you. It's actually a snake, and it can kill you. If you, like these things which we depend on other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or that we take as we should only take Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're like snakes and they can kill us. And they can take different forms. And when he through that, when he let go of that, he realized he was able to see it in its true form, like what it can be. And by throwing that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the thing, that something that is taken, or either taken as a dependency or an attachment, or something that is loved for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for just it's something that's dependent on or loved other than for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is just like that snake. And it can, what a snake is deadly, but yet he thought that it was something innocent, something safe, something in fact that's supporting him. But if you put your but that's the thing, like other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is nothing else. There is nothing else that you can put your whole weight on like that. And you'll see that those things which you do try to do that with, they can bite you and they can kill you, just like a snake. Then he tells him to take it back and not to be afraid. This is interesting. So he says, Allah said, now seize it and fear not. He will return it to its former condition. Now when he's grabbing the means, it's by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before that, he was leaning on it. It was a dependency other than Allah, then when he's told to take the snake, now it's by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's not dependent on it. It's not an attachment, but it's by Allah. Allah tells him, take it back. Now you're going to be okay, because if it's by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're safe. But if it's not, you're not safe. If it's not, you're not safe. If it's not, then it's a snake and it will kill you. So he takes it back, but this time it's different. And he takes it by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now he returns it to its original form. But it's all in Allah's hands, all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very powerful. I mean, I can't express how powerful it is. Obviously, I can't. And then the next thing he tells him, and draw in your hand to your side, it will come out white without disease. Another sign. Again, think of what he's telling him to do. He's telling him to take his hand and put it here under his arm. What do you do with your hand? What do you do with your hand? I mean, your hand is used for what? Again, means. It's all means. It's all things that we depend on. We use our hands to do things, to get things, to, the things that we think that we control with our hands, right? So he's taking, basically, put your hand away. Put your own hand away. Doing things by yourself, by oneself, by one's nafs, right? He is teaching him to do everything by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Put away the hand. So the hand, this is what you would use to do something by oneself. He says, hide it, put it under there. And when you bring it out, now it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's white and it's shining and there's no defect in it. When you do something by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now it's like, it's without defect. But when you do something by yourself, this is anything, whether you make a decision by Allah versus by the self, whether you love by Allah or by the self, whether you act by Allah or by the self, anything. If you do it by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's without defect. If you do it by the self, it will always be defective. That we may show you some of our greater signs. Next ayah, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell Musa alayhi salam? اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Alright, now your training is done for now. Go to Fir'aun. Go to Fir'aun, for indeed he has طغى, he has transgressed all bounds. Okay, so Musa alayhi salam, some people can look at this story and be like, oh, this is a nice story. It's Musa alayhi salam. He's going to Fir'aun. What does this have to do with me? It's just a cool story, right? We learn it when we're kids and, it's kind of a cool bedtime story. But no, it has something to do with you. Every single one of you. And me. Who is our Fir'aun? Who is our Fir'aun? Well, the greatest Fir'aun is the nafs. Every single person has a Fir'aun internally. Like, Fir'aun. إِنَّهُ طَغَى. Indeed, he has transgressed all bounds. Our nafs has done that. So what we need to do is اذهب إلى فرعون. We need to go and address that tyrant that we have inside of us that has transgressed all bounds. Now look at this. So how do we do this? How is he told to do it? So Musa alayhi salam, next he says, قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي وجه. And so here Sheikh Mukhtar, Musa alayhi salam, basically he's told to go to Fir'aun and he begins to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for one thing after another, after another, after another. Musa alayhi salam kind of asks for a lot of stuff. One after the other, request after request after request. After all the requests, his first request, رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي. اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي means expand my breast, expand my chest. Musa alayhi salam had a hard task to do. We have a hard task to do, and it's hard. And it sometimes it's sometimes we don't always feel sharh. You know, sharh is like when the chest is like, you know, when you feel good, you feel elated. We don't always feel that way, right? Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes we feel really down. Sometimes we feel really, you know, like our chest is narrow. So, you know, Allah, here the Prophet ﷺ, or Musa alayhi salam, is asking for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open his chest and to make it, you know, to make it easy for him, what he's going to do. And the next, وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي, and make my task easy. وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِنْ لِسَانِي, and remove the knot from my tongue. يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي, that they may understand my speech. And then he asks, and appoint for me a minister from my family, Aaron, Harun, my brother. Increase through him my strength, and let him share my task, that we may. So look what he does. He asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make his brother also a prophet, Harun a prophet, and so that he can help him and support him, in order to do what? Two things, he says. كَيْ نُسَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا وَنَذْكُرُكَ كَثِيرًا, so that we can increase through him my strength, let him share my task, that we might exalt you. سَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا, it comes from subhanallah. When you say subhanallah, that's tasbih, right? So that we can exalt you much, وَنَذْكُرَكَ كَثِيرًا, and remember you much. That's the point. That's what he's saying. Those are the two things he wants to have him in his. Yes, it is. That's true. It is differentiated. It's like dhikr is encompasses exalting, but here you're right. It's specified as to, you know, differentiated. Yeah. كي نسبحك كثيرا ونذكرك كثيرا إنك كنت بنا بصيرا. For you have basira, huh? That's true. That's true. So the point that she's saying is that any kind of friendship or any kind of companionship should be for these, to help you in these things. These four things, which is increase through him my strength, and let him share my task, that we together may, you know, help each other and exalt you much and remember you much. That is, you're right. That's a litmus test for good companionship. That's what a companion should be for you. Actually, that should be the purpose. That should be actually be the purpose. إِنَّكَ كُنْتَ بِنَا بَصِيرًا. Indeed, you were of us ever seeing. Bina basira, he explained, is kind of like, it's not just like looking at something, but it's like watching in a loving way. It's kind of like overlooking, you know? When you're overlooking something, you're taking care of it by overlooking it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always been doing that for Musa alayhi salam, since he was a baby. And what happened to Musa when he was a baby? We know the story, right? He was put in the river, and he was picked up by who? His enemy. His enemy is actually the one who took him. Look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can protect you. Even in the, you know, like the hand of the enemy, in the mouth of the beast, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can protect you. There's a lot of signs. Inshallah, I'm gonna just sort of give, you know, inshallah we'll continue next week. But one of the things I want to sort of fast forward to is he goes and he begins to start talking to Musa alayhi salam after Musa gives, you know, makes all these requests, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I will give you got your request. You're gonna get what you asked for, and then goes on to recount to him all the stuff he did for him even before he asked, all the stuff he did for him even from when he was a baby. But inshallah, I'm gonna go into more detail then. But the ayah I really want to end with, and the point I want to give you guys kind of ahead, is that he says, when he's advising Musa alayhi salam before he goes to Fir'aun. I'm just going to find that ayah. Yeah, basically what I'm not sure which ayah it is because I'm overlooking it. But what he says to Musa alayhi salam is, I don't, because they probably translated it differently, is when he tells him to go, one of the advice that he gives him, or what one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him is not to slacken, not to weaken in his remembrance. That's what he tells him. And so the issue here is that Musa alayhi salam is going to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not like Allah's not telling him, just don't, instead of doing no remembrance, do some remembrance. Don't let it even become weak. Don't let it become slack. Don't slacken in the remembrance. And really, I feel like within this ayah is really the answer to the question of what goes wrong. What goes wrong when whatever it is, whether it's, you're not understanding why you're feeling a certain way, or a certain thing is going wrong, or why this thing isn't working out, or really you ask yourself, you say like, well, I am remembering a lot. I mean, I pray. Some people don't even pray, right? But I'm praying. What's the problem? It's not just that you need to just, it's that there's some weakening, there's some slackening in this aspect, in the remembrance of Allah, in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes that's true, that we compare ourselves. What we do to make ourselves feel better is, in matters of deen, we compare ourselves to those who are less than us. That way we can feel good about ourselves. But when it comes to matters, in fact, what we're supposed to be doing is, in matters of deen, we're supposed to compare ourselves to those who are better than us. And it's only in matters of dunya that we're supposed to compare ourselves to less than us. But we do the other way around, right? In matters of dunya, where we look at the people who have more than us, and then we don't feel grateful. And then in deen, we look at the people less than us so that we can feel arrogant. We feel self-satisfied. But what we really are supposed to do, and alhamdulillah, this is something which is exactly what these types of retreats is. It's like you're comparing yourself with people who are so much better than you. People who are better than you in deen, and it humbles you. And that's the way we're supposed to be in deen, instead of looking at people who are less than us in deen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who remember Him much. Don't just remember Him, but remember Him much, and don't slack in His remembrance. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه غفور رحيم. سبحانك الله وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.